now, Rob, in having a conversation with you about, what you're seeing in the biotechnology sector. And we can talk about, AI, broadly, but also
Mhm.
maybe what you're seeing on the Gen AI side. And really interested, anybody that's on the call would love, if you want to come on camera, engage in the conversation, that would be appreciated as well. And we'll take any questions you may have. If you don't want to come on camera, and you don't want to speak, there is a chat, and we'll try and monitor that as well to answer any questions you may have. So thank you again for joining us. And Rob, please, any insight that you might have on the biotech sector?
Yeah, sure. So our organization, as you know, Mark, sort of is an HR satellite organization for a bunch of the SMEs. A lot of people forget that in biotech, they always equate biotech with the large pharmaceutical firms. In fact, that's the vast minority of companies. We are an industry made up of small and medium-sized enterprises. So what's interesting here is there's twofold. One part of this that's uh, industry agnostic, where these SMEs are businesses like everything else. So they market, they sell, they finance, they do all of these things, right? And they have investors, they have stakeholders. So part of this is simply from an efficiency gain is certainly attractive to understand all of this. But there's another part of it from a practicality perspective is that these small and medium-sized enterprises are uniquely driven by their intellectual property, which is the formula of that little molecule or the patent that's associated with a medical device or anything on stuff like that, or the genome of a certain plant. All of these things and all of these things are just code, right? These are all code. So absolutely directly affected by generative AI. The problem that we've got here is that IP law, where generative AI is concerned, is the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
There has not been law even created yet. There are some lawsuits that are out there, mainly in Europe and in the States. But even in the Canadian law, we've got law firms that are scrambling to try to advise to their clients. And don't forget, you got to understand in the large law firms and everything else, if you ever say there are dedicated PhDs and people who are experts in these fields that are acting simply as patent agents for law firms. So they're the ones in the gig economy, because these SMEs don't hire lawyers, that are looked at as the experts, that they farm out the IP to make sure that that's the life's blood, right? The IP is what drives the commercialism, what market plans are all about, everything else. And there's simply no indication as to, if you use generative AI and you put out the genetic code to create, you've talked about protein folding, to create a certain enzyme, whether it's in a plant or an animal or whatever else. What you said is exactly right. Now, what happens is a lot of times medicine and in biotech, you build on molecules, right? And molecules will lose their patents after several years, but before it becomes a common ground, that's how pharmaceutical firms and drug companies, et cetera, make their money, right? On the patents that are held on these molecules or drugs. But what happens if you use generative AI to, for example, or even non-generative AI, to lessen the pathway to scientific innovation based on the library of information out there? Why wouldn't you, right? I mean, it's simply an efficiency gain. But the problem is then your intellectual property is out there for the using, right? Because it becomes part of that universe. Right? Now, suppose somebody takes the molecule that you put out there as now part of the library of the universe, whether it's patented or not, and tacks on a couple of carbon atoms in a spectacular format, or puts on a little grapple grommet on the end of a medical device. Who owns the intellectual property for that? Is it the generative AI platform itself? Is it the original, Noam Chomsky, I think famously, Mark, is saying, like, what we've really created is the largest source of plagiarism possible, right? Because of course nobody gets credited
Yeah.
when you're using AI. You don't get a little ibid saying, by the way, this is from William Shakespeare, this quote, or anything else. It's conglomeration. And that's the real scariness, because of all of this IP, et cetera, that's out there. Is it plagiarism?